most meaningfully impactful way to describe my journey through the Ecology, Spirituality, and Religion program will be to begin at what I will call the period of gestation, for I was a pandemic kid. Another way of saying that would be that I thought I was finished with school and had no active plans to return. But circumstances gently yet persistently pushed me in that direction, and now here I am in the integrative seminar as the capstone class for another MA degree. I have to go back to the time of April 2020, as the pandemic was just beginning to rage. I was working for a temp agency at the University of Oregon as a custodian and trying my very best to get hired as a permanent employee due for the benefits package, but also because that was a place where I could continue, I could take discounts. Employees can receive discounts on classes, and so I could just have my lifelong education dream. But as it turned out, the university had been systematically downsizing, but by April they decided to shut down completely. So one of their first acts was to let go of all the temps, so I suddenly found myself unemployed. A month later, as fate would have it, life tends to have assemble a confluence of events during periods of significant change. But in May 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 3C colon cancer, which was quite a shock because the next level up, stage 4, is terminal. Mm-hmm. And it turns out my hemoglobin count was so low, they accelerated the process, and so I was ordered to have emergency surgery to remove the tumor. That happened on June 22nd. After a blood transfusion on June 22nd, 2020, I celebrated the solstice with a hemicolectomy. So now I have partial removal of the large colon. But during the period of convalescence, I felt very fortunate that this was happening in the summer because I could recover out on my patio sitting in the sun and listening to my new favorite genre of music, death metal. No pun intended. But that was also fortunate because the people let go due to the pandemic were automatically qualified for unemployment compensation. But by August, there had been a few months already. I guess there was so many unemployment checks, unemployment applications being processed at once. There was a big delay in the receiving checks. So by August, I still hadn't received a check, and I was due in a month in September to begin chemotherapy. So things were starting to look a little bit desperate. Wondering what to do next, and then all of a sudden a light bulb went off. Bing! Maybe I could go back to school. I had already had a PhD and 2 MAs at that point, but it sounded like a real possibility. I worked with a guy named Will Keepan, who was a faculty in PCC, and he always spoke very highly. We worked together on the Eco-Village Design Education curriculum. And he always spoke very highly of CIIS, which to me sounded like a rather peculiar school. But he, for example, was the first person to recommend Passion of the Western Mind as an example of the quality of education possible at CIIS. So even though it felt kind of a wild possibility, I went ahead and applied. And to my surprise, by the time I actually did apply, it was mid-August. I just had 3 days to get all my application materials together and all my recommendations, but somehow magically it all happened. And soon I was being interviewed, and I was accepted into California Institute of Integral Studies. Yoo-hoo! My favorite. It turned out good, fairly good, considering what was possible, what was potential in those days. But now I started out in the Transformative Studies department because of everything that was going on, the idea of systematically looking at transformation from an academic angle sounded very appealing. So I was accepted into the Transformative Studies doctoral program. And I did 2 full semesters there, and was in the summer semester when news came out that a program called Ecology, Spirituality, and Religion, which was the sister program of Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness, ESR, was preparing to offer their first online semester. So the combination of words ecology, spirituality, and religion summed up quite nicely all my previous studies. So I jumped at the idea and interviewed with Elizabeth Allison, the program chair. And I remember during the interview asking if I could enter the master's program, even though I had a PhD already, because at that stage I surreptitiously was envisioning, after completing an MA, going ahead and applying to the PhD. Once I landed in CIIS, I was in no hurry to move on. I found a tremendous fulfillment in being a student, perhaps because I was the first person in my family lineage to go to university of any kind. And to me, it's a sign of, it's a noble profession, being a student, in my opinion. So there I was, the first fall semester of ESR's online program, and 2020, fall 2021, and I started out with two classes with PCC heavyweights. Sean Kelly had just published his book, Becoming Gaia, and so he created a class out of that called Collapse and Regeneration, and then Jacob Sherman offered his class, Book of Nature. And I was just blown away by the quality of education these guys presented. It was amazing to watch Professor Sherman giving a Zoom lecture, and he could suddenly seem like spontaneously recite a whole paragraph, or produce a whole paragraph of literary exegesis of someone like Plutarch or the Cistercian monks. It was amazing, this kind of this grounding in the humanities that I never got a chance to experience before. And Professor Kelly, of course, he was rather subdued, but the subject matter that he was presenting was intense, because he was very convinced that there's collapses coming. So out of that class, I added to my vocabulary words like collapsology and Gaianthropocene and becoming Gaia, words that I'm still using today. The next semester then, which would be spring 2022, 2 more heavyweights, with Richard Tarnas offering his class on Evolution of Religious Consciousness, and Robert McDermott, the famous Robert McDermott, who I read earlier, his book, The Essential Aurobindo. And I finally did get around to reading Passion of the Western Mind before I arrived at CIS. But I was just amazed at the quality of the educators in my new school. And I do believe that was both Rick Tarnas and Robert McDermott, their last classes as faculty at the school. So I felt very fortunate to get in on that in time to be part of that. Now, Robert McDermott, his class was amazing. The karmic biography, where we had a chance to scrutinize and evaluate our lives in terms of karmic patterns, and then begin writing our own autobiography. But by this time, I was just blown away, because a couple years earlier, I was had been diagnosed with a potentially life-threatening illness. Now here I was on top of the world. It felt like a tremendous gift, and to match the quality of the education I was receiving, I determined to become the the best student I could be. And that brings up this the idea I have that studying is my yogic practice. In the sense that there's the Jnana Yoga, which is the yoga of knowledge, but it's just the process of reading, writing, research. It can be approached as where yoga means making union with the divine. This can be a process towards making contact with divinity. And then throughout the day, I like to add yogic practices, maybe not to set aside an hour to just practice hatha yoga, practice poses, but just sitting in my reading cushion. I sit in a half lotus while I'm reading. I don't have any sofas in my residence. Or even when I write, I'm sitting in a half lotus and writing that out. Of course, then there's an opportunity to add all sorts of other practices like mantras or pranayama, or I can lean back where I'm writing and suddenly do a halasana or sarvangasana, integrating yogic practices in and out throughout the day, a whole day devoted to reading, writing, and research. And I found a special word for that called lucubration, which was an old Roman word for writing meditatively under candlelight. I think that can still be applied to. That is the process that I'm using as a student, where I make yoga, my yoga practice. And then, the next semester, I think I'm not intending to go into chronological order here, but this all kind of happened at once. There's these amazing series of educational events. So that next semester, I got my first taste of East-West psychology with Debashish Banerjee's Integral Yoga Psychology. And there I finally had the vocabulary, integral yoga. I could describe my intuitions of lucubration and studying as a yogic practice. I can now readily define it in terms of an integral yoga. And that was another experience of just these world-class faculties where Debashish Banerjee, he would be given in our Zoom classes, students would come up with these deep questions, and he would just provide these flowing answers that seemed to be emerging straight from the source. So Dr. Banerjee, he's a world-class educator, but he's also an accomplished yogi, an accomplished integral yogi for sure. And that very same semester was my first class with Elizabeth Allison, our program chair. And that was a theory and methods in integrative studies, something like that, which I felt very comfortable with, having already completed a PhD, because we talked about methodologies and theory construction, and this is kind of the meat of a doctoral program, getting into that kind of vocabulary. And so I put the two together, Debashish's class and Dr. Allison's class, and I wrote my first research study proposal as a final paper, and that was titled Adapting Integral Yoga to the Aspiration of Becoming Gaia. So this was a very PCC or ESR, if you want to combine the two together, or that branch of CIIS. This was a very PCC ESR proposed study. And that was very thrilling, and I was happy that Dr. Allison was supportive of what I came up with, so I felt really grounded in the program, and I go, yeah, I'm ready to keep going with this. I just love being a student. So that brings me up to just what a magnificent spiritual gift I felt. Having a few years earlier by this time, I'm not sure if what was going to happen, unemployed and be getting ready to start chemotherapy, and now here I was just living on top of the world, and I just never ever forget what a tremendous gift I've been given to be a student in ecology, spirituality, and religion. So that brings up one more faculty who I didn't get a chance to take a class with before he retired, but who has been very influential to my evolving thesis, and that, of course, is Brian Swim and his evolutionary cosmology. But even though I didn't actually take a class from him directly, his influence is all throughout the curriculum. And just as it happened, the culmination of my program last semester, which you kind of like to see that, don't you? Like everything's building up to a climax. And so I took a class by one of Brian Swim's students, Dr. Rachel Vaughn from the Integrated Psychology Department. She presented a class called The Living Universe, which is very Swimian in concept. And I began exploring outside of the mandatory readings, and I found a very interesting conversation underway in the scholarly journals, laying the groundwork for a new field called cosmopsychism, which is a non-dual metaphysics. So it can be compared in some ways to Advaita Vedanta, the classic non-dual cosmology. But I feel tremendous value if possible. I'm really excited about this. So I'm so excited that I just completed an application to the ESR Accelerated Doctoral Program, which would be fabulous to get accepted and continue this education, but taking one day at a time these days. But the title of my proposal is Creating Our Own Realities Through Non-Dual Metaphysics, preparing for entrance to the Gaianthropocene. And my purpose with that study is it's very contemporary in that there's all these various versions of reality flying around out there. But us educated folks of good intention, we want to see a preferred reality, what the ecological utopia that's necessary to emerge from the polycrisis. So this is what I'm proposing. The methodology, of course, will be an integral yoga, but the power of a non-dual metaphysics is realizing that the manifestations of the one are not just agents of the one, but are the one itself. And this, once we realize that, the universe is expanding, and in the fields that become open during this expansion, it's not just expanding out there, it's expanding in our bodies in front of us, and these novel possibilities emerge as the universe expands. So if we don't have a separation between us and the one, but are in fact acting as the one, then we can manifest a preferred reality. And that's what I want to run with. I really hope I get accepted. And that's all for this talk. So see you online.